Hi, it's Elise here at Bowman Library in our children's room with a whole new middle grade book spotlight. So our theme for this week has to deal with a super important day that's happening today, and that's Martin Luther King Day. So our theme for this week are books that deal with the civil rights movement. We have a great mixture of fiction and nonfiction. Some talk about maybe events you already know about, may shed a little more detail into them, and we have some others that bring up stuff that you may have never even heard about that are super important to our history. So let's get started. Our first one is The Port Chicago 50 by Steve Sheinkin. Again, Steve Sheinkin, amazing nonfiction author. This book is no exception. So during World War II, African Americans were allowed to serve in the military, but they were segregated. They received less and worse food. They had incredibly poor housing, and then they were also assigned the worst and lowest jobs in the military. So at Port Chicago, which was a military base in California, African American sailors had the job of loading live ammunition onto ships. And to make it even crazier, they were given no training. They were just told, go put those bullets onto that ship. So in 1944, while completing their job, while doing this loading of this ammunition, a ship exploded, killing over 300 African American soldiers. Officers then ordered the surviving men to go back to work, and 50 of them decided that was not going to happen. They refused to follow this order. They were then charged with mutiny, they were imprisoned, and then they were dishonorably discharged. As horrible as this situation was, though, it did lead to the military to take a look at their practices and to start desegregating the military. You are right there in all of this. There's before, there's the middle, there's the after, there's tons of photographs, there's court transcripts. Steve Sheinkin even went and interviewed some of the 50 sailors that were involved in this, so you get firsthand actual counts of what happened. This is the Port Chicago 50. Glory Be by Augusta Scattergood. So Glory lives in Mississippi, and she's getting ready for the 4th of July because that is also the date of her birthday, and this year she is turning 12 years old. Every year, because her birthday is the 4th of July, her birthday is a traditional pool party. But when the community pool is closed in order to not let African Americans have access, Glory is completely disappointed, and she's also really confused about why this is happening. She soon starts to realize, though, what is going around her in her community, how whites are treating African Americans and how things are just radically different between the two groups. When Glory befriends a new girl in the community who is African American, Glory soon starts to be on the receiving end of hatred and threats from members of the community because she's friends with this girl. She's unsure of what she's supposed to do because this girl is just like her. So why should she be treated any different? This coming of age story is one that's incredibly eye-opening. It's full of emotions. This is Glory Be. Stella by Starlight by Sharon Draper. And Sharon Draper is super, super awesome. So Stella is growing up in segregated North Carolina in 1932. She loves to sneak out of her house at night, and that is where she finds her inspiration for all her incredible writing. One night, though, she sneaks out, and her brother sneaks out after her. They witness a meeting of the Ku Klux Klan, which has recently just come to their community. The Ku Klux Klan is a group that is against African Americans, and they are very dangerous and don't mind destructing property of African Americans. As news starts to spread throughout the community that this group is there, Stella becomes more and more scared of where she is living. But what is amazing is that the community she lives in, they support everyone and each other, and she finds herself being able to face her fears even after this group burns down the house of another family in her community. Also, on top of this, there's so much excitement because her father is able to register to vote for the very first time. So that is a whole other storyline in this book on how difficult it was for him to do this in 1932 in North Carolina. This is based on her grandmother's childhood. So Sharon Draper has grown up listening to these stories based on true events. This is an incredibly amazing story about how we can support and encourage one another, and about how things were back in the 1930s and even to today, unfortunately. So this is Stella by Starlight. Another nonfiction. So this is 12 Days in May by Larry Dane Brimner. This may be about something that you might have heard of, but not really know what it's about, or maybe you have never heard of this before. So hold tight, because it is a super important and amazing piece in our history. So it's May in 1961, and there's a group of 13 individuals. There's men and there's women, there's blacks and there's whites, there's old and there's young, and they board 2 buses in Washington, D.C. with the goal of heading down to New Orleans so they can help with the civil rights movement that is taking place in the South. They decided ahead of time, though, that they were going to do whatever they wanted. So technically, segregation was illegal on a federal level, but unfortunately, that did not stop states from creating their own laws. So they decided ahead of time that as they went further south, they were not going to follow the state's laws of segregation, because they really wanted to see, A, what would happen, and B, it is technically illegal. So the further south they go, the worse it gets and more violent the opposition they face, culminating with one of their buses being firebombed and facing a mob which injured many of the riders. This book provides a look at their journey from start to where they end. It talks about the negatives and the positives that came from it. And even with all of the negatives that did happen, there were positives that came out of this event. This is highly recommended. There's filled with tons of pictures. There's even updates about the writers. There's primary sources. Larry Brimner has done an amazing job with this important piece of our history. So this is 12 Days in May. Midnight Without a Moon by Linda Williams Jackson. So Rosalie Carter finds herself living with her grandparents on a cotton plantation, and she's working on their plot in order for them to have a little bit of money to live off of. Her family, her parents, are living in Chicago, and that's where she dreams of going. She doesn't want to be with her grandparents. She wants to be in Chicago with her parents. She's doing her best to live in the segregated South, and the only thing that saves her is her friendship with the Reverend son, Hallelujah Jenkins. But when the murder of Emmett Till, who is actually a child visiting family and he lives in Chicago, when that happens though, and then when his murderers are set free, Rosalie is so frustrated, but she knows she needs to find some inner strength, and she needs to stand up for what she believes, because what happened was not right. This historical fiction book has so many touches of realism. You will be able to relate to Rosalie with her thoughts and the choices that she decides to make. You will not be disappointed with what she decides to do. So this is Midnight Without a Moon. And our last one for this week is a little bit different from a lot of the books we look at. This is Martin Rising, A Requiem for a King by Andrea Davis Pinkney. So why this is different is this is a novel in verse. It is filled with poems. And along with that, there are some amazing watercolor paintings done by the author's husband, who is also an amazing illustrator. This is all about Martin Luther King Jr.'s life from January 1968 until he is assassinated later that year. This is told in 3 parts, and you will get to see all of the amazing things that he accomplishes in this short year. It talks about the efforts that he makes to end segregation, and he wants to make sure that everyone has equal rights. Everyone who knows who he is, we all know the amazing things he accomplished, but this set of poems provides so much more insight, especially to this period of time that we usually don't discuss. This will help you appreciate Martin Luther King Jr. even more for what he accomplished and what he believed. So this is A Requiem for a King, Martin Rising. So these are just 6 of the books that we have here that deal with our topic of civil rights and all the history behind it. We have way more here, so feel free to come on down, take a look at either these 6, or we're here to help you find a book that you would love to read. I hope you tune back next week when we have a whole new middle grade book spotlight with a completely different theme, and I hope you have an amazing week.